My friends, I stand before you today to declare a truth so great, so overwhelming, that it will sound unbelievable to many. Heaven itself has already released the divine funding. The vaults of glory have been opened, and there is a wealth transfer taking place that will not only touch your hands, but transform your generations. This is not the imagination of men, but the orchestration of the Almighty. When you look at the world, you see chaos, uncertainty, and scarcity. Economies rise and fall, systems collapse, and fear takes over hearts. But in the midst of that storm, heaven is not shaken. Heaven has no inflation, no recession, no lack. The resources of heaven are unlimited, and those resources are not meant to remain hidden in eternity. They are being transferred into the lives of those who believe, those who dare to trust the promise that their Father in heaven is the owner of all silver and gold. Do not limit your vision to what your salary can produce, what your education can secure, or what your environment can provide. Lift up your spiritual eyes and see that heaven has already signed the check of abundance for you. When you align your faith with God's plan, you tap into a divine economy where giving multiplies, obedience unlocks, and prayer pulls down the blessings that eyes have not seen and ears have not heard. This wealth transfer is not just about money. It is about influence, opportunities, creativity, and ideas that will reshape families and nations. It is about dreams that seemed impossible now becoming reality. It is about children rising from poverty into positions of honor, about families once broken now walking in restoration and dignity. When this happens in your life, your family will look at you and say, "We never believed this was possible." But remember, this is not for selfish living. Heaven funds His people to be channels, not containers. What comes into your hand is meant to flow through you to bless others, to build communities, to lift the broken, to spread hope, and to demonstrate that God is alive and generous. So stand in faith today. Speak boldly over your family, your business, your destiny. The transfer has already been authorized in heaven. Now you must receive it on earth. Walk with expectation, give with joy, dream with courage, and live with the assurance that heaven has funded your future. And when it manifests, it will be so glorious, so unexpected, that your family and the world around you simply will not believe it. The reality of heaven's vaults being open is one of the most profound truths a believer can grasp. When we think of wealth, our minds often run to banks, treasuries, or investments here on earth. But heaven does not operate by the fragile systems of men. In the unseen realm, there are treasures already prepared, blessings already designed, and resources already set aside for those who walk in faith. The silver and gold that men run after in fear and greed are nothing more than dust compared to the storehouses of heaven. When we hear that heaven's vaults are open, it means there is no lock, no barrier, no restriction standing between us and the blessings that have been promised. This is not a future promise waiting to unfold one day far away. It is a present reality for those who dare to believe. The greatest tragedy is not that heaven has withheld anything, but that so many people live unaware of what is already available. They pray as if God is reluctant. They live as if heaven is bankrupt, when in fact the King of Kings has already declared that His children shall lack no good thing. Imagine a child whose father owns a vast inheritance, yet the child walks around begging because he has not discovered the access to his own wealth. That is how many live spiritually, unaware that heaven's accounts have been credited in their name. The moment faith connects with this truth, the moment a person chooses to believe that heaven has already funded their provision, doors begin to open. The blessings do not descend because of human striving, but because of heavenly authorization. Just as a signature releases funds from a bank, so faith acts as the signature that draws from heaven's treasury. The vaults are open not only for survival but for abundance, not only for individual comfort, but for generational transformation. When heaven funds something, it is complete, overflowing, and tailor-made to accomplish a divine assignment. These resources are not limited to finances. They include wisdom, strength, peace, influence, and opportunities that no earthly system can manufacture. Every dream placed in your heart, every vision that feels too great, every assignment that seems impossible is already backed by heaven's vaults, waiting only for your faith to pull it into the visible world. When we look around at the world, we see constant reminders of scarcity and instability. Markets rise and fall overnight, nations slip into economic crises, and families struggle to make ends meet as inflation eats away at their earnings. This reality of lack often creates fear, stress, and hopelessness. But it is important to understand that heaven does not operate under the same rules as earth. In heaven there is no shortage, no debt, no bankruptcy. The resources of God's kingdom are limitless, eternal, and never subject to recession. When a person anchors their hope in earthly systems, they are easily shaken by the news, by their job security, or by the instability of their environment. Yet those who lift their faith to the higher economy of heaven live with an entirely different perspective. They recognize that while the world may cry scarcity, heaven speaks abundance. This is why people of faith can remain calm when others panic, because they know that their source is not tied to a paycheck, but to a provider whose storehouse never runs dry. Think about the wilderness where the Israelites wandered. There was no farmland, no shops, no employment, and yet bread rained from heaven and water flowed from rocks. That was heaven's economy at work in the middle of a desert. The same God who sustained them then has not changed. In times when businesses collapse and banks fail, heaven is still unshaken. To believe in heavenly abundance is to reject the mindset of limitation and to embrace the truth that your supply is connected to an eternal kingdom. It shifts how you think, how you pray, and how you live. Instead of asking, "Will I have enough?" you begin to declare, "My God shall supply all my needs according to his riches in glory." Instead of being paralyzed by fear of tomorrow, you start moving with boldness, knowing that provision is already accounted for. Heaven's abundance is not only sufficient to meet needs, but to create overflow so that others can be blessed through you. This contrast between earthly scarcity and heavenly abundance is the very foundation of trust, reminding us that though the systems of men may fail, the storehouses of heaven remain forever open. Faith is the bridge that connects the believer to the resources of heaven, and without it the wealth transfer that has been spoken of remains unseen and untouched. The promises of God are vast and eternal, but they are not automatically activated in a person's life simply because they exist. They are drawn down into reality through faith. Faith is not wishful thinking or empty hope, but a deep conviction that what God has declared is already true regardless of present circumstances. When a person believes with unwavering confidence, they unlock what has already been authorized in the heavenly realm. Just as a key opens a locked door, faith opens the storehouses of heaven and brings into manifestation the blessings that otherwise remain hidden. Many people pray but doubt, they give but fear, they hope but waver, and in doing so they short-circuit the flow of God's provision. Faith is not about seeing results first and then believing. It is about believing first, even when there is no sign of evidence. When you stand in faith, you declare that God's word carries more weight than the numbers in your bank account, more power than the uncertainty of your job, and more certainty than the opinions of those around you. Every great move of God in history has been preceded by men and women who chose to believe beyond what their eyes could see. Abraham stepped out without knowing where he was going because he trusted the promise. Noah built an ark in the absence of rain because his faith was rooted in God's word. In the same way, believers today must take bold steps of faith if they are to access the wealth heaven has reserved for them. This wealth is not only financial but includes vision, creativity, divine connections, and influence, all of which require faith to activate. The moment you release fear and doubt and begin to declare God's promises as your reality, you align yourself with the flow of heavenly resources. Faith transforms impossible situations into testimonies. It turns closed doors into open ones, and it positions you to be a recipient of the divine wealth transfer already decreed in the spirit realm. When people hear the phrase wealth transfer, their minds often run only to money, but the reality is far greater and deeper than financial increase alone. The wealth that heaven is releasing includes dimensions of life that cannot be measured in currency, yet carry immeasurable value. One of these is creativity, the ability to see solutions where others see problems, to imagine possibilities where others see dead ends. Creativity itself is a form of wealth, because it births innovations, businesses, art, and ideas that change societies and impact generations. Alongside creativity comes influence, which is the capacity to shape opinions, open doors, and lead others into new directions. Influence is a heavenly resource because when entrusted to the right people, it brings justice, truth, and hope into environments that have been controlled by darkness. Another dimension of this transfer is opportunity, the moments and connections that cannot be manufactured by human effort, but arrive as divine appointments. One meeting with the right person, one open door in the right season, can shift an entire destiny. Heaven also transfers restoration, turning broken families into testimonies of unity, healing wounds that have lasted for years, and giving people back what was lost through failure or oppression. Restoration itself is wealth, because no amount of money can buy peace in a home, love between parents and children, or healing of deep emotional scars. This transfer also reaches into generational transformation, where children and grandchildren step into levels of education, honor, and leadership that were never available to their ancestors. It is the lifting of entire family lines from obscurity into visibility, from insignificance into purpose. When this transfer happens, people suddenly find themselves walking in rooms they never imagined, carrying authority they never sought, and living dreams they thought were out of reach. It is heaven's way of demonstrating that abundance is not limited to material possessions, but flows into every area of life. True wealth is walking in divine purpose, carrying joy that circumstances cannot steal, living with wisdom that guides decisions, and holding a vision that inspires others. This broader understanding of wealth reminds us that money is only one piece of the inheritance, while the full package includes every resource needed to fulfill destiny. When heaven's wealth transfer begins to manifest, it does so in ways so astonishing that even those closest to you may struggle to comprehend what is happening. Family members who have watched your struggles, your setbacks, and your ordinary life will suddenly see doors opening, opportunities multiplying, and blessings overflowing in ways that defy human logic. They may shake their heads in disbelief, because they remember the seasons when you had nothing, when you were overlooked, when you were barely surviving. Now, as heaven begins to release what was stored up for you, the shift will be undeniable. This is the nature of divine blessing. It arrives in such a way that no one can attribute it to human effort alone. It is not the result of connections or luck, but the visible evidence of heaven's hand at work. Think of Joseph, who was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and forgotten in prison. His own family never imagined that he would one day rule in Egypt. Yet when the famine came, they found themselves bowing before the very brother they once despised. In the same way, when heaven funds your destiny, it elevates you to a level that causes even your family to marvel. They will say, "Wow, never believed this could happen," because what they see in your life contradicts the picture they once held of you. This is not to shame them, but to testify to the greatness of God, who chooses the weak to display His strength, who raises the lowly to reveal His glory. The suddenness of this blessing is what makes it unbelievable. One moment you are in lack, the next moment you are walking in overflow. One moment doors are shut, the next moment they are swinging wide open. Your family's disbelief becomes a stage for God's glory, because the transformation is so evident that no one can deny it. They may question, they may wonder, but deep down they will know that something supernatural has taken place. This is why you must prepare yourself for the astonishment of those around you. Because when heaven's transfer touches your life, the testimony will not only belong to you, but will ripple through your entire household. The purpose of the transfer is never meant to stop with personal gain, because heaven's resources are not given simply to make one individual comfortable, but to position that person as a vessel of blessing for others. When wealth comes into your life, it is a trust from God, a responsibility that carries divine intention. To receive from heaven and keep it only for yourself is to misunderstand the heart of the giver. He funds His people to become channels that pour into families, communities, and even nations. A container holds resources but eventually runs out, while a channel allows resources to flow continuously, touching everything connected to it. This is why those who embrace generosity and stewardship always see their blessings multiply, because what flows through them never dries up. The more they give, the more heaven replenishes, since heaven's economy operates on the principle of circulation rather than hoarding. When divine resources are used to feed the hungry, to clothe the poor, to educate children, to lift up those who are oppressed, they carry eternal impact far beyond what money alone could achieve. The purpose is also to demonstrate the goodness of God in tangible ways. People may not always believe sermons or words, but they cannot deny the reality of kindness, provision, and love shown through action. Every act of blessing becomes a testimony that points back to the source. Communities see transformation not just because someone has wealth, but because that wealth is used with intention, compassion, and wisdom. The purpose extends even further into advancing vision and building platforms that spread hope, truth, and opportunity. When businesses are started, when schools are built, when innovations are funded, it is heaven's wealth flowing into earth for the good of many. The one who receives becomes a signpost of God's faithfulness, a living example that divine resources always come with divine assignment. This understanding shifts the focus from selfish ambition to kingdom responsibility. You begin to see your increase as a mission, your prosperity as a tool, and your influence as a responsibility. When heaven entrusts wealth to you, it is because He intends others to see His love, experience His provision, and discover His reality. Through what flows out of your life, walking in expectation is one of the most powerful attitudes a believer can carry, because it keeps the heart open to receive what heaven has already authorized. Expectation is not passive waiting, but an active posture of faith that looks forward with confidence, knowing that something greater is on the way. When you live with expectation, you begin to align your actions, your words, and your mindset with the reality of blessing, rather than the fear of lack. Speaking boldly over your family, your business, and your destiny is part of this posture, because words carry creative power. What you declare consistently shapes the atmosphere around you and draws into existence the promises you are standing on. To give with joy is another step that activates the flow of heaven's resources, because generosity breaks the grip of scarcity and keeps your life open as a channel. Every seed given in joy becomes a magnet for greater harvest, not just financially but in opportunities, relationships, and peace. Dreaming with courage is also vital, because heaven funds visions that are bigger than the human mind can conceive. When you dare to dream beyond your limitations, you give God room to display His abundance. Expectation also requires endurance, because sometimes the transfer does not manifest instantly. Yet even in waiting, the heart that expects continues to prepare, continues to speak, and continues to give as though the blessing were already visible. Living with assurance means carrying a deep inner confidence that no matter what current circumstances say, the outcome has already been decided in your favor. This assurance is what allows believers to remain unshaken in trials, because they know that heaven's word cannot fail. Action steps of expectation include waking each day with gratitude, treating small blessings as signs of bigger ones to come, and refusing to let doubt or negativity shape your outlook. It also means surrounding yourself with an environment of faith, voices that remind you of abundance instead of fear. As you keep walking in this expectation, you begin to notice doors opening, ideas flowing, and opportunities appearing that others might miss. What was once invisible starts becoming tangible, not because you forced it, but because you aligned yourself with the heavenly flow that was already in motion. The transfer that heaven has authorized is not something distant or abstract, but a present reality waiting to be received on earth. And the key to unlocking it lies how you position your heart and actions. To walk with expectation is to live as though the promise has already been fulfilled, refusing to be swayed by circumstances that appear contrary. When you give with joy, you declare through your actions that your trust is not in the limited resources of this world, but in the unlimited supply of heaven. Joyful giving becomes a sign of faith that multiplies, for the principle of sowing and reaping ensures that what leaves your hand never leaves your life, but returns in a greater measure. Dreaming with courage is another vital part of this transfer, because dreams are the containers of destiny. If you only dream within the limits of what you can achieve by yourself, you leave no room for heaven to show its abundance. But when you dare to imagine visions that seem impossible, you invite the supernatural to intervene. Boldly speaking over your destiny is also necessary, because words shape the atmosphere of your life. Every declaration of faith becomes a seed planted in the unseen realm, and in due time it produces a visible harvest. Living with assurance means carrying the unshakable conviction that what heaven has promised cannot be stopped by the failures of men or the systems of this world. This assurance steadies the heart in trials, reminding you that delays are not denials, but part of the process of preparation. The transfer has already been authorized, which means it is not a matter of convincing heaven, but of aligning yourself on earth. This alignment comes through obedience, prayer, generosity, and faith-filled action. It requires rejecting the mindset of scarcity and embracing the reality of overflow. The moment you begin to walk in this truth, you notice shifts around you, opportunities arising where none existed, relationships forming that carry divine purpose, and doors opening that you could not have forced by your own strength. The wealth transfer is not only about personal elevation, but about equipping you to influence and uplift others, proving that heaven's generosity always carries a greater mission, my friends. We have seen that heaven has already opened its vaults, that earthly scarcity is no match for divine abundance, and that faith is the bridge that brings the unseen into reality. We have understood that this wealth transfer is more than money. It is creativity, influence, opportunity, and restoration that will transform generations. We have recognized that the blessings will be so astonishing that even our families will struggle to believe it, and we have learned that heaven's purpose is not selfish comfort, but to make us channels of hope, generosity, and change. Now the call is clear: walk with expectation, speak boldly, give with joy, and dream courageously, for the transfer has already been authorized. Step into it with faith, live as if it is already yours, and let your life become the testimony that heaven funds its people for greatness beyond imagination.